Sitting next to me is a famous photographer.
Where is he? Oh, sorry.
Mark Edward Harris, and it's so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Samantha. Great to be here.
Yes, you know me. I'm all
Obviously.
about mental.
Well, we're
mental
great
resilience.
friends, and I know exactly what you're doing. You're amazing, and I love what you're doing with the show.
Oh, thank you. So I wanted to get you on this interview for a long time because you've traveled so much as a photographer, and you've been to so many adventures. You have also faced a lot of, almost life-threatening situations.
Yes, I was married.
You are married.
Okay.
And
I see. Sorry.
You've been to Korea, North Korea, for
10 times. North Korea, yeah. Iraq twice. No, I'm sorry. Iraq once. Iran twice. But things can happen anywhere. But yeah, so no, I do. So for 101 countries, I must admit I'm a country counter, but now I'm starting to slow down where I feel that I really want to focus on certain places. The strongest photo essays come from being focused on specific subjects. Mm-hmm. And so we talked earlier before the broadcast about what we were going to talk about, and one of the things for photographers in general, and I know we're supposed to be psychology focused in the mind, but for the photographers out there, and I was actually speaking with somebody earlier today about it as well. When you come up with project-specific themes, the more specific, the better. Editors have a mantra: a location is not a story. And so I really do keep that in mind when I'm looking for projects to do, but also to stay focused on the projects that I'm doing.
And can you share with us about your latest adventures?
Well, I just got back from Borneo and did Japan on the way because as something I've been working on for a long time is a series called The Way of the Japanese Bath, which is about Japanese hot springs, and also not just, okay, here's a pretty hot spring, but how it really is a part of Japanese culture. Mm-hmm. And when you have millions and millions of people living in mega cities such as Osaka and Tokyo, it can be mind-boggling, and they're like, salarymen living in these, in little apartments, going to offices, working in cubbyhole situations, working late at night, extremely stressful. But then these ryokans, these Japanese-style inns where they can get away, salarymen and salarywomen, and really be part of nature and the essence of that is really an incredible thing. So, we talk about, I know the popular word is mindfulness, these days, and I think that escape and it's been going on for a long time before modern society. The Japanese bath dates back, there's records to 700 AD, which is the start of Kyoto period, and then later Edo period and all that. It's all gone through, and so at that time back then, maybe they didn't need it as much for stress reduction, but the whole thing with Japan society and being part of nature has been around for a long time. Obviously, the tea ceremony, flower arranging, cherry blossom viewing, snow viewing. These are things to all connect with nature. I mean, you look at the haiku, like somebody like Basho, for instance, the poems that have, 5, 7, 5 syllables and all that. It has to do with nature and the simplicity of it. You look at Sumie paintings, the simplicity of it. There's something amazing about the Japanese aesthetic that is a very sort of unconscious way of creating these, connecting people to nature. And it really is interesting because of the dichotomy between the intenseness. Anybody who's been to Tokyo before, I'm sure a lot of the people listening have been, how intense it is there.
It is very intense.
It's very intense, right? And then all of a sudden you're out in nature. So don't know how that works. That's for more people on your side to analyze how that works. But it does work, and I think part of it is getting out. And so the Japanese bath is a bit of an ode to that connection with nature.
So that book was like my first exposure to your photography, and I have it next to my bed, and when I really flip through it and really admire those photos, like it really takes me to that place.
Good.
Relaxation and just slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how did you capture that? And
well, it's interesting because I've had my own struggles with anxiety and all that too, and I mean, as we all have our own set of issues to deal with. And I was there in 1991 or 92, and just by chance, a girl I was going out with at the time said, let's go down to Beppu, which is a very famous town for onsen, for hot springs, which I didn't know at the time. And I went there and I had a camera, of course, and I shot some photos, and the results, magazines really reacted to it and really liked it, and I loved it. And so then it sat dormant for a while. And then in 2000, when I had a show with Nikon in Shinjuku, it was not about onsen, it was just about more travels and other things I had done. But I then took the opportunity to get back out. I'm sorry, the show was 92, so it was a little bit later. And I shot a second hot spring. Then in 2000, I went back for another show, and that's when I really started the whole project in earnest, coming out with the first book in 2003, then second edition 2009 or 10. And now, a couple of months ago now with the third edition. So this is going to be a lifelong thing for me. And I think as the photos show, there's an endless amount of incredible hot springs. And they're all a little different. They're sort of like golf courses. Every golf course is different. And that's another thing that I do for relaxation, enjoyment. You're in the moment. You cannot be a good golfer. How do you hit a little golf ball 250 yards? When you look at Tiger Woods or any pro golfer play, they are completely in the moment, and that's what I find with onsen. That's what I find when I'm shooting. I am in the moment when I'm shooting, and I love that feeling. So people say, "Oh, how can you go to North Korea?" Where I've been 10 times.
Yeah, please share that experience.
Well, I feel so in a moment when I'm there, so alive. I'm creating work. I know this is this is history in the present, which is sort of an interesting way to say it, but history, I might want to write that down. But it's really true. History, it's in the news. We hear it one way. There, they hear the news from here another way. And the truth lies. I don't know if it's exactly somewhere in the middle. Some people would say, "Oh no, how could it possibly? It's so evil there," or whatever. And then they might say, "Oh, how could it be so this or that?" But when I'm there, I really am in the moment, and I love that feeling. And then you talk about like the latest thing. So I have been working a lot with orangutans, and so I went to.
It's so amazing, that series.
Well, it's and that really, there's a whole psychological thing going on with that because, well, first, so on this last trip, I stopped in Japan in Shikoku, which is a new area for me of Japan. I shot there briefly, but I wanted to work a lot more. Since I've been to Japan so many times, I'm sort of running out of places to shoot there, sort of. Actually, there's going to be an endless amount. But I went to Shikoku, was there for a week, shot some new hot springs, went to a cat island, which was really cool, where the cats outnumber people 10 to 1. Then I went down to Borneo. So the main focus of this particular trip was to get to Borneo to continue on with orangutans, because in the wild, because of palm oil plantations, deforestation, they are in severe danger. And so I want to show for this newest book project what it looks like for them to live in the wild, juxtaposed with my portrait series, where I'm lighting them. I'm working with the orangutans at various zoos and rescue centers around the world, and by using very powerful strobes. Of course, it's not going to be an issue for them, just like a flash is not an issue for us. But I want to overpower the ambient light, or in certain places I can bring a backdrop, because I just want it to be a study of them, because each one has very strong individual personality. And I think with the way I'm doing the portraits, we could see the sentient beings behind their back or behind their through the lens. And I really love that. The results of if I'm allowed to say that about my own work, I really find it fascinating to study them and by the reaction of other people, it seems like they
it's so
enjoy it as well.
relatable. It's there's like sentient when you said it.
Yeah.
I know we almost like we humanize objects a lot.
Oh, for sure, that's true.
And
We do.
I completely see like that's my cousin.
I mean, we actually do share 96.4% of the same DNA. Actually, chimps have more like 98%. So one could say, oh, well, they have a higher percentage or whatever. But basically, I think when it comes to emotions and relating, for whatever reason, and there's primatologists who could answer, or speak to that better. There is something very relatable. They really do seem to care, or to be of interest. Not, when I've worked around chimpanzees, and I have nothing against chimpanzees. Don't get me wrong. No, but they're more interested in grabbing whatever you have. And there's definitely some mischievous orangutans the same. But most of them are really curious what you're doing, and they have a very sophisticated. They tend to be solitary, especially the males. Adult males are really off on their own. But the females, when they have an offspring, they will stay with it 6 to 8 years. And they're unbelievably close. And some of the portraits that I'm doing, show that, the mother and child.
Right.
So because I think the males, are loners in a way, they do seem sort of more studied than when you see big pack animals are sort of running around. It's really amazing, and I'm still discovering all the time. And I'm very fortunate to work with world-class primatologists who are informing me more about
Their
them.
behaviors
Yeah, and they're down to two places. Well, for 100,000 years, they've been down to two places: Borneo and Sumatra. And the numbers in Sumatra are really alarming in terms of how many are left. And unless something changes and laws are enforced, and these final national parks and places that there's absolutely no tearing down of the forest, if the laws are enforced, we have a chance of saving them. But we've got to continue, and the answer is not let's just get rid of palm oil, because people have to live too. Palm oil actually is a product that, if done responsibly, actually
can be very
takes.
sustainable.
Well, we need it. People, anybody who's ever worn makeup, cooked, or whatever, that a lot of the world uses it, and it's not as damaging per acre or per hectare as some of the other oils. In other words, everything pays a price, but it's got to be done responsibly, and there's ways to manage that, and that's vital. So
yeah, thank you for bringing that awareness, like as a photographer.
well, I tried to, and I think when you look at like my hero, W. Gene Smith, did a whole series as well. Yeah, what he did in Minamata with the mercury poisoning going into Minamata Bay to bring an awareness to him. First of all, almost you talk about dangers, almost cost him his life, because he was beaten up by hoodlums who did not want, the company was trying to protect itself.
Yeah.
And so there can be dangers, and so.
Why don't we talk about your experience? Like, you've been in dangerous situations.
Yeah.
And how did you cope through it? How did you manage?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do, obviously. I mean, if you believe, and I remember my little psychology classes and all that. I do believe in sort of like the Freudian developmental years and all that, and how much your early years are important to you. And I think growing up with a father with polio. So a very tough guy, never an excuse like I couldn't do this because. Whatever followed because really meant very little. And so I sort of grew up that way, and I took off when I was 16, backpacking around Europe with not much money, so I would sleep in parks and go in office buildings after they closed, and I could sleep in a stairwell and stuff. So that built up a confidence that I could survive and travel places. And that early building block really is paid off later, because, if I'm in North Korea in a pretty rundown, hotel, in on the East Coast, which is a lot poorer than Pyongyang. Pyongyang, you can stay at a very nice hotel, live pretty large, as they say. You get to the East Coast, it's a little more rugged, and I have confidence in myself that I can handle situations, because you do this so much. There are things that are not expected. We were hiking, in the jungle, and it's the rainy season now in Borneo, and a cobra went right in front of us. And this is his territory or her territory. But still, it's like, wow, cobra, that's pretty intense, right? Because you get bitten by a cobra and you're out there and you got to like cut into the muscle tissue right away before it spreads. You're going to be in bad shape. And plus we were hundreds of miles. You're not going to survive. And then finally we get back to the lodge and there's a python in the kitchen. So it's like, wow, this is rugged. And so I give guys credit, or men and women I should say, obviously. When I say guys, I mean both, right? That have lived out there for years. I mean, and so you take Jane Goodall, who was working with chimpanzees in Africa. You take all these explorers. I do study it since my background, bachelor's history, master's in history and photography. So Shackleton, in Antarctica and all. You look at these people, what they had to deal with. I'm still going back to an air-conditioned lodge, and so Borneo for me, it might be tough to have leeches on me, and mosquitoes and things like that, but basically not too rough. Iran, I got interrogated on the Iran-Iraq border. That was pretty intense, but I stayed pretty cool, and I think part of it was giving myself over to a bit of a fatalistic thing. Meaning that what's going to happen, getting all anxious about it isn't going to help the situation. But I did also try to think clearly when I was waiting to be called in. But I think honesty is really the way to go.
Honesty with yourself, honesty with
with them.
Okay.
With them, in other words, they know probably more about me than I know in a certain sense. And so if I think I'm going to be clever and say something, I just said what I was doing, or I was shooting. I did a book on North Korea, and I'd like to do a book on Iran. And I was at a place called Khorramshahr, and I wanted to go down the Shuttle Arab waterway to get out of Iran to Kuwait. Now, that was also changing my ticket, so that was a red flag to them. It's like, why am I here on the border? Why did I all of a sudden change to leave? And I told them exactly why. And so we talked for at least, I guess I was like an hour and 45 minutes of being sort of held back. And then at 11 o'clock, a hydrofoil was leaving, and I was sure I wasn't going anywhere that day. And a friend of mine, Roxanne Sabiri, had been in jail there, so I know the dangers there. But then all of a sudden, 1 minute to 11, literally, I got handed back my passport, and he shook my hand, and and also I was sitting at a desk where I was illuminated by window light, and he was backlit without any light on, so he was sort of sitting in a shadow. So it could have been pretty intense, and it could have gone any direction, but I did stay pretty cool.
How do you manage stress?
That's an issue I do
After
work
all this
with.
Experience,
Yeah, well, working out is huge.
being in your body.
30 minutes on an exercycle. I study Japanese while I'm riding the bike. I try to do that every day I'm in LA and really getting a sweat going. But also, going for a hike. We're in LA, and so I love going up to Griffith Park. And you and I actually on some jobs have done some long hikes across endless hikes, and you know how I am.
Yes.
Thank you.
You really power through it.
I love it. I like sweating. I like getting out there and getting the muscles going and stuff.
I
And
remember the sand dune experience.
the sand dunes of France. Who knows? Who knew that the biggest sand dunes in Europe were in France along the coast, and it was an endless hike. I wish we had more water with us that day. But other than that, we made it. And but that's the way. You got to power through stuff like that, but I do think it comes from a lot of it comes from having a father that had to overcome extreme polio, really. I mean, he just had like one arm was just dangling down and a severely curved spine, but yet he made it to 93. He died last year. But even in the 3 days when I was with him in the hospital, it was so impressive how he passed away. Just so powerful within. He wanted to live. He never signed a do not resuscitate thing. He loved life. I mean, people like that. I know we talked before, and I gave you a copy of a book by Gordon Parks called Voices in a Mirror, and I would highly recommend that book for anybody who I think it should be mandatory reading in every high school, because it's about how to not I couldn't do this because. And I was fortunate enough to know Gordon and interviewed him for my first book. Oh, and he's also in my first book, which was about photographers and the racism he had to overcome. But he just flew past it. It's like, hey, maybe that photographer wouldn't have gotten a job either. Maybe it's not a black and white thing. Who knows what the answer is? I'm just going to do the best I can. And he faced real racism in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, no doubt about that. I mean, there were some very famous magazines that wouldn't hire him simply because he was black. But then there were others, Life magazine, Harper's Bazaar worked with him, and he also, which a lot of people don't know, was the director of Shaft, which I think is pretty cool.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, he was a very impressive guy, and so I really, Viktor Frankl, who for the people in the psychology world or psychiatry world, obviously, know him. That his book, about his experiences in concentration camps and how he used that as a way to sort of analyze human nature is amazing. Mm-hmm. So those all sort of
learning from others.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's constant, because I also then for a lot of magazines I do interviews with other photographers and other creatives, and constantly learning from them, which I think also helps the energy and the excitement. That's a never-ending, source of inspiration for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, Sammy.
I appreciate your work. Where can we find you?
Well, thank you for asking that. So now, finally, I'm a very late bloomer into the Instagram world or the social media world, because of doing a lot of work in North Korea, Iran, and all those places, Lebanon. I wanted to stay under, not undercover exactly, but just below the radar a little bit. But because I'm sponsored by some great companies, they said, you gotta be in social media. And I realized that, and I came to realize that. And so at Mark Edward Harris Photo is my Instagram, and my website is just my full name, Mark Edward Harris. If people are interested in the books, then Amazon carries it. And obviously, my favorite ones are the new North Korea book, just called North Korea, and The Way of the Japanese Bath. I also have a how-to book called The Travel Photo Essay, describing a journey through images. And then I do have a book on Iran and other, and Wanderlust, and the book about photographers. But I would say if somebody wants to know a little bit more about how I do what I do, then The Travel Photo Essay is a good book. And if anybody's into Japan, then I would definitely say The Way of the Japanese Bath. And for world politics, North Korea, and actually then I did a South Korea book too, which are sort of bookends for each other.
Yeah, great work.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you, Mark.
I appreciate it. Thanks.